All right. Getting into other conversations for this hour. Our guest for the hour is here. Milka Wahu is here with us this morning, Executive Director at Amka Justice, and also a lecturer at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology. Good morning, Milka.
Good morning.
How are you?
I'm fine. And you?
Karibu sana.
Asante.
Good to have you here. It took you a minute.
Yeah, it took me a minute. I came from Machakos.
You came from Machakos where it is underwater.
By a boat.
What's the road like?
No, the road is okay.
The road.
Not very bad. But I came from the other side, not the Kitengera side of the river.
Yeah.
I think the river is worse, that other side of Kitengera. Yeah. Yes.
Well, it's good to have you here, and better late than never, isn't it? Today we're looking at minimum wage, and of course, as the days start to get towards May 1st, when there's the hope for certain things to be said or done, we want to look at domestic work specifically, and we had conversations, and we're having conversations about work that is possible to be created for youth, younger people, for children, and saying that this is an aspect whereby they can work, but how can they actually be protected? As we get into that conversation today, we want to welcome you properly as you take a breather, and we do that by giving you proverbs. CT goes around the continent every week, comes back with a basket full of proverbs from one country. This week we're in the Republic of Congo, and CT has that proverb, and then what we would like you to do is tell us how that proverb resonates with you and what it means for you. Yes? All right.
Because of waiting too long, the gorilla lost its tail. It's just a proverb, Milka.
Yes.
Because of waiting too long, the gorilla lost its tail.
Yeah, I didn't get quite the question, the conversation.
That's the proverb.
That's a proverb.
Yes.
Now we'd like you to tell us what you think it means.
Because of waiting too long,
The gorilla
lost its tail.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
You got me. Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah, but
there
yes.
is no
Yes.
right or wrong response.
Yeah, I think so.
It is your opinion.
Yeah, it's my opinion.
We'd like you to tell us how you interpret this proverb.
Yeah, I think it's just like when we say justice delayed is justice denied. From a lawyer's perspective,
Very good.
most things are timed. If the time passes, then it becomes obsolete. Yes.
Like opportunities.
Yes, opportunities, yes.
Sometimes-
There is nothing without time limit. Yes.
It comes, and if you let it pass, it's gone.
It's gone. It's gone. Yes.
There you go.
Yeah.
Nothing without time limits. And the discussions that we're having this morning and looking at domestic work, the children's conversation has been front and center for a while, and that we're seeing a lot of that come up. A couple of weeks ago, and I shared this previously, there was an article and it talked about a lawyer, and actually it's not just an article, but it's an action that the lawyer has taken a case to court whereby he's saying that, on holidays, children should not be allowed to work, because a lot of parents now activate that time when children are on holiday and then make them work around the house could be equated to domestic work, that parents could actually get in trouble. If this is actually heard, and if this is actually heard by the courts and discussed, we could be looking at a situation whereby if you put your kids to work at a certain level, whereby sufferation then is brought into the equation, it could actually be deemed illegal, and parents could actually start to have an issue when it came to the justice system. But let's do some definitions first of all, shall we? When we talk about domestic work and where we can involve children, in what arena are we actually talking about here?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important to make it clear that children should work. That is a general rule.
Okay.
The parameters and where and how is what matters.
Okay.
First, children should work in the house, in their homes. It is a child's obligation and duty to support the parents. Okay? And that is the law. Even the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child has a whole list of duties of what children should do to support the home and the family. However, what is a problem is when we put children to work that affects their health. And when you talk about health, they're talking about physical, mental, emotional, that is highly affected, and also stop them from living their lives as children. That is, they can't enjoy recreation, they can't play outside with the other children, and they can't go to school. So when work affects the child's ability to enjoy the children's rights that are enshrined in the Children's Act and other international conventions, then that's where the work is a problem. But work is important. How will you have responsible adults if they are not working? Mind work. Yes. Yes. So they should work in a way that is structured. Let the child work, then go play outside, go to school when it's time to go to school, and come back and also continue with helping with the work. So mostly we are looking, the problem is when this child goes to work in a third party's place.
Yes. So now we're asking this same child, if this child is removed from the home setting and now starts to work in a setting whereby they earn some kind of wage, what protects or what guides this employment that this child will take? And remember, child, we're talking about between the age, for working now, we're talking about between the age of 11 and 18, or is it less than that?
Yeah. In terms of working, between 11 and 13, it's very little thing that they can do. Very little. In fact, hardly are there opportunities for working in a third party place, unless it is simple thing or things which are advancing their talent, like there we see children going to comedy and such. We are not talking of a child who is hired in a normal way of employment, the way we look at employment. We are talking of a child who is in space for a short period of time, not more than 3 hours.
Okay.
Yes? Period of time. So mostly the group that is a bit problematic. So any other work for that 11 to 16 to now 15 to just before 16 is illegal. 16 to 18 they can work, but also the Employment Act is very clear. What work can they do? Remember the general rule. They can work as long as it does not affect their ability to enjoy their rights as children, which rights we have talked about, including going to school, including recreation and all that. So the nature of the work is also in the schedules of the Employment Act. There is a list of work that a child can do and a list that a child that cannot do. There are those we call hazardous work that they cannot do. They cannot work like in quarries, industries, all these industries that manufacture things and all these species. There is also a list, I think in the 4th or 5th schedule, that list of the work that a child can do. Among that list is a child cannot be hired to be cleaning, cooking for families, and such kind of work. So when you come to child domestic work, when you remove cleaning, the house, cooking, and washing the clothes for the family, what work is remaining? Maybe look after a child. It's not in the list.
Yeah.
That list is of what a child should not do. So, and that's what we are saying. As per the law right now, a child in a domestic setting, and that is the 16 we are talking about, then in that case, it's a problem, legally speaking. Unless this list of chores that a child can do or work can do is revised, then it still remains a problem. But I see it. If a child is in a third party, not in their home, in a third party's house, working as a domestic worker, cleaning, cooking, looking after children, will they really be able to enjoy their rights as a child? Do you think there is any person who is hiring a 16-year-old and allow them to go and play and enjoy their rights as a child? It's a very dicey situation. Yes.
You know what I find interesting is the issue of work here is, well, work isn't the issue. The issue seems to be if that work is specific to an engagement or a contracted engagement, whether it's verbal or otherwise, and for which there is a remuneration, a payment. Meaning, if a child is cooking in their parents' home, that's okay. They're cooking in their home. If they're sweeping and cleaning and looking after the younger siblings, it's in their home. But the moment, as you say, a third party engages them and there's a payment attached to it, then we run against the headwinds of the law. Is that so?
Not exactly.
Yes.
There is work they can do, even in third parties. For instance, in the East, a child can go to my neighbor's house and for some hours, not the whole day, for some hours help with the cleaning, including cleaning the car. Okay? In my neighbors can clean my neighbor's car and they get paid. But they cannot, according to that list, they should not go and get hired in a car wash and spend their whole day washing cars there. So there is an issue of what work they can do that is outlined, and also an issue of how many hours continuously should a child work. Yes.
Okay.
So that is the law. I mean the strict letter of the law. Yes.
Minimum wage comes into this, as we look at this question. Minimum wage comes into this, and now when we're looking at children who are minors, under the age of 18, you're declared a minor, and then now we say, when this child can be engaged in such employment or with such duties, do they fall under the bracket of minimum wage? And then how is that then calculated or even expressed when now you know very well you've hired a child?
Yes, they should be paid minimum wage because anybody who is working should be paid minimum wage. Yes. So this discussion, like I said, is very dicey because we have situation of like those children who are 16, 17 who have not gone beyond class 8 and they have found themselves, maybe they have even gone for vocation, which is like 2 years, and they find themselves in the employment. And that's where we are talking about relooking at these laws and policies and trying to balance. Is there a way that these children can still work in this environment? But the only question is, how will you protect them in these private residences, which are high areas of abuse? It's not like any other employment place like this. Now, but if a child is hired, then they should be paid minimum wage.
As we then ask the question and say, look, with the big dip that we have in education, with those who are able to continue with education, there are huge numbers every year of those who don't. And sometimes we say, what are we going to do with them? Right? Where do they go? What do they do? And we've said they can't work. But here we're opening up a conversation and saying, yes, actually, you know what? They can work. And there are spaces in which they can be accommodated, but we have to make sure that they are protected. And is it something that can be policy? Is it something that then can be formalized with the proper safeguards in place? How would we see something like that playing out, Milka?
Okay. Yes. Just to clarify, we have said we are talking about children who are 16 to 18.
Yeah.
Between 16 to 18. Those are the ones who can do some work. And according to the law, there is a list of what they can do and what they cannot do. But also the reality, children below that should not be employed. And especially below 13, absolutely no. So the reality is that they are working. There's some children who are working, although you can see there is that conflict with the law as to the kind of work they are doing. But when it comes to, and that is a debate now we must have as a country in terms of policy alignment, aligning the policy with that if we have children who are coming out maybe of vocational colleges and 16, 17, because they didn't go to high school, and they would like to engage in work that is classified like domestic work, then under what parameters should they be able to work? And this issue is mostly about protection, because what we see on the ground is most of the children who work, they are abused. And because they are children, they are not able to negotiate, including minimum wage. They are not only not able to negotiate against abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, a lot of emotional and insults and all that. So you find that children get into very abusive situation because of how domestic work is structured. It's in someone's home. In most cases, you'll find that child does not even live. They don't even know about their right to having a day off in a week. And these are the rights that they should be able to enjoy as they work in this particular home. So we need to think, if we say, and we open and say, that children between 16 and 18 work in this environment, how then do we ensure that they are protected within that environment? They enjoy the entire rights, gamut of rights that other employees within such kind of environment in domestic work are also enjoying. So that is something that really needs to be, we need to engage in the policy arena. Yes.
There's a reality here that unfortunately creeps into this discussion. That reality is called poverty.
Yes.
The moment someone is poor, it automatically comes with very many negative things that work against you, the person who's poor. You are disempowered because of poverty. You cannot actually negotiate well because of that disadvantage. So if you look at adults who are disadvantaged because of poverty, they will take any amount paid, even if it's below what it has been stipulated as law as minimum, because they need to survive. Case in point, when you look at the watchmen who oversee places that we live in, we know what the law says about what they should be paid, but that is not what they're paid. And how do we know this? Because we talk to them, and they explain to you, and they tell you. Now, that is an adult. If this adult has a child who is 11, 12, and this child is willing to work, because this child also understands that they need to support the family, okay? The disadvantage of this child will be multiplied.
Definitely.
Because they have gone to work with the consent of the parents. Now, our lived experience in this country is such that it is important that we understand the law. And even if our people understood the law, the poverty, and I'm going back to it again, and the disadvantages it brings with it, it becomes really difficult for these things to be actually implemented as they should.
Yes. First, I would like to mention that poverty is a very serious driver of child work. However, it's not the first. Research has shown, even research that has been done by the Freedom Fund, has shown that family breakdown, the social structure, where mostly in cases, for instance, mother and father separate, and children are left in between. And left in between is what causes many children to end up in labor, because they don't have anyone to look after them. The other thing is, a child who works and starts to get into this third party, remembering again this third party and this environment of full-time work, then we lose that child. We lose that child. Because this work, we ask ourselves, why is there the law in the first place? Because the law is not just there for purposes of just having us being regulated. There is a mischief that the law also seeks to solve. And what is the mischief? To protect this child's life. To protect this child's emotional, psychological, physical well-being. So the moment we put this child to work, we are going to be having a child who is going to lose out on all these health parameters. And what adults are we going to have? An adult who is affected, and most likely a poorer adult than the parent. So the problem of child labor, it's that it does not solve the poverty problem. It increases 100-fold. Because what is the experience we have with our communities we work with? Children who end up at work in RS age. We have in our Amka Africa website, even in the we have done some stories of lived realities. This girl is she's orphaned, she has nowhere to go. So she ended up in domestic work at 13 years. At 15, 16, she's a mother out of rape from that same house. So at 16, when she's a mother, is she poorer or better? So the law is important for always having minimum parameters so that we can always have something that we are striving to achieve. We can't just say because we are not able to do, let's not have the law. So we must have a minimum parameter that we're trying to achieve. And that's why we have minimum wage, we have minimum age for children to work and even for others. So as we strive to work towards there, we must ask ourselves, are we making the situation worse than it was?
How do we ensure, how do we enforce a lot of these things whereby a lot of these activities, a lot of these actions are not formalized? And when I say formalized, is you have no idea how many 13 or 15-year-olds are working in a domestic setting around the country. You have no idea. Do you? Do we have an idea of how many there are?
Not
we
exactly.
don't have a bureau where this information is being collected. So how do we ensure that safety parameters and guidelines are being kept whereby we don't even have the numbers or the data about how many of them are involved in this kind of practice? And how can you protect if you don't know the information?
In many parts of this country, whether it's urban, but most in the rural areas, you will find these young children working, not because they're going to be there permanently, but to raise money to pay fees. Yes. There are people who, for instance, who during the harvesting season will be part of the harvesting, part of the planting season. And the reason is to raise money. What you say is absolutely true about families and how it is that in situations where the family has broken up, the children, of course, become extremely vulnerable.
Yeah.
Now, the truth is that the majority of families are not broken. The numbers of broken families are rising, but they don't, as of now, constitute the majority, not in this country. It may at some point, but right now it doesn't. But the question we ask ourselves, you see, I'm stuck on this poverty issue.
Yes.
If you look at many of the issues, whether the people who are poor or not, the fundamental problem in many situations where there's a breakup in a relationship, it's money that is involved. Either there's too much of it or there's very little of it. But it causes, it tends to play a very important role in the breakup. When we talk about understanding the rights of children within the context of employment, an organization such as the one that you lead, have you, or is it that you've already done so, ensured that the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development, when they look at the curriculum for teaching students, this is something that is taught so that children actually understand their rights as they go along and as they go through school? Okay, because if it's taught, then it'll be understood. Okay, that's number one. Two, whether it is that even beyond primary, secondary, this understanding continues so that at every phase of a young person's life, they interact with this knowledge. Because if we are talking about change, because these children will become adults at some point, if the knowledge is inculcated at an early age, when they're adults, they will still have that knowledge. But if it isn't, then they will be stuck in whatever forms of life their parents and those who are older than them had.
Yeah, what I know is in the curriculum there's children rights. They are taught children rights. And even mine, they keep telling me, oh, it's all right. When sometimes I tell them things they don't want to do or things. But you see, these children rights, the way they are taught, they're not taught in context. Like, for instance, there is no context within employment. So a child knows their right, but once you remove them from home, then they don't know their rights extend up to where. So they will not be able to claim for the same rights if they're in an employment setup. Maybe that's where the gap is, that they need to know your rights extends beyond here, and if you're in an employment as a child, these are also your rights to this point, to that point. That is one thing. The other thing is, we must be very careful, because this debate, by the way, it's not just a Kenyan issue.
Right.
It's a world over problem. Child labor in terms of definition, up to where, what, it's a problem. We call it a wicked problem. A problem that does not have solution in one package. It keep turning itself around, and you find a lot of threads that you can't really tie up completely. So it's a big problem even worldwide. But we must be very careful as we talk to our people, that we don't make it appear that children should never do anything and work. For instance, I grew up in high poverty, coming back to poverty. In high poverty, what we did on Saturdays and in all school holidays, we will go to our neighbor's land and pick tea. I come from small-scale tea growing area. So we would be picking tea and being paid for the kgs that you have picked.
At what age was this?
From as early as 10, I think. Yes, and we will not be in picking tea the whole day. So we'll go with our parent. We pick tea, go and take it, get it measured, and our parents are paid. And in the afternoon, we go to the river to take maybe the cows or to swim or to do whatever else. That is not illegal. And on Monday, we are in school. Remember what I said. Work that prevents a child from being a child. So in the afternoon, I'm at the river, enjoying the river. I was working in the morning somewhere, and we made some money. And on Monday, I'll be back in school. Now, that work would be problematic, and which would be illegal and should be illegal in that sense, if on Monday I go back to the same place to pick tea and I don't go to school. And so I drop out of school. I am there, even if it's Saturday, from 6 to 6, because I'm a child.
Let me give you an example of something that I witnessed some years ago. In the early years of this century. That was when the HIV and AIDS scourge hit certain parts of this country. It was so devastating that you find the majority of adults, not some, had died. So the people who were left were 17-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 15-year-olds. Now, many of them now became the adults in the home. You go to a region in those early days and you want to talk to the elders, and you're met with 17, 18-year-olds. Okay? They have to fend. Many of them were fishermen. Now, if you look at the wives are children. And when I say wives, you'll find one individual has 2 or 3 wives. This fellow is around 18. So a child has married other children. Okay? Now, these were unusual circumstances, though. But because fishing guaranteed an income, there are many people who, under those circumstances, preferred to go and fish because you start earning money at a very early age. I'm still stuck on poverty, and I'm still stuck on the lived reality that makes people do certain things. See, what you describe is something that happens in many communities in this country.
Yes.
And it is controlled.
Yes.
And it is even understood. Okay? But what happens when those dynamics change?
It is an obligation of the government to ensure that there are structure, social structure, and social security structures to protect vulnerable children. And we must always try to hold the government accountable. Because if we don't protect our children, we have no future, even as a country, or even as a continent in Africa. Statistics, by the way, shows right now, the 2023 statistics, that the last few years, the number of child laborers in Africa doubled, and they are more than all the other continents combined.
How do they explain that?
And then we ask ourselves why we are poor. Because we are not taking care of our children. So it's the responsibility of the government to ensure their social structures. If I die, and the father of my children die, and the children are young, there should be social structures to ensure that those children, again, even though they'll be able to do work here and there, they're able to continue with school. They're able to continue with school. They're able to access basic human rights, and they're able to grow to be responsible adults.
Right.
And that's how nations develop. We don't live a structureless life where if the parents are died, children just scatter, and poverty will increase. And that's why government has structures, even local government structures. There is an assistant chief. There is a chief who is supposed to see that that home is now orphaned and to get these children into the government system so that they can access. Actually, of late, the last few months, I've seen government really registering these vulnerable children.
Yeah.
There is a system and there is a program that is going on. And even during the time of the HIV scourge, there was the OVC.
Yes.
Program that was registering children, trying to support. Countries like Botswana previously had very strong system of supporting children, especially during the HIV/AIDS time. Children who were orphaned and they were supported, and those children ended up becoming okay and being very productive members of the community where they would have been even if their parents were there. So we cannot live. We cannot say now we let our children scatter out there. Let the assistant chief find these children, this 11-year-old, this 12-year-old who have dropped out of school and gone to fish because the parents have died or the parents have become irresponsible. Actually, I must mention here, and I'm sorry to say so, that a lot of time parents are just not bothered. Yes,
but
because we do these cases.
Sure,
we do these cases.
Understood.
Yes.
Yes. Milka, but these children, are they out working, earning money for themselves, for the benefit of the family, for the benefit of themselves, or having been sent out by their parents? Which one are we looking at here that overrides the other?
Most of the time you find a child working because they don't have the ability to decide I'm going to work. A few of them find themselves in workspaces because maybe they were truant and learn away. But most of the time the parents is involved. And this money goes back to the parent. This money goes back to the parent. And in the process of this, the child's life is affected in a way that it cannot be repaired for the rest of their lives in most cases.
But then are we seeing that in this day and age, then, like you're saying, if chiefs and assistant chiefs now becoming more involved? Because, I mean, yes, we heard a couple of weeks ago that, there's a talk that, children's street families would be done away with, children's homes essentially would be shut down. But then do we see involvement when it comes to where are these children going? Is there now more vested interest by the state to make sure that children, teenagers are actually taken care of who do not have a structure of the family unit in place to take care of them? Are we seeing that?
I wish government came with me today. There was someone to come from government. But all I can say, it's something that we must continue striving towards. In the rural areas, it's easier. Where my rural area, I see the chief getting involved. Actually, you find like, I've seen my chief on Christmas time. My chief is my neighbor. So
your chief is probably your relative.
Yes, actually my chief is a relative.
Yes.
So, and we talk, and I ask her around what is happening. You see her getting very involved about these children who have done class 8 and they are not going, who is not going, how can they apply to Equity and those other places. Only the problem is here in Nairobi because of monitoring structures are very difficult for a chief. They don't even know who is their subject. Here in Nairobi becomes a bit difficult. But even stories on issues of street children, there are many other systemic injustices we have that happens and bring children into the whatever. Maybe is a story for another day. For instance, we have so many alcohol laws which are jailing women and leaving out their children unattended to, and they end up in the streets. So we need to look at even other things which make children go into the streets and go into work. So, when it comes to protecting children, it is a responsibility first of government and then of the parent. It is not me to ask my child to go and get money for me. It's me to go and get money for my child.
Right.
It's also my responsibility to find out what opportunities exist. So you find most of these parents who are telling children to go and work because we don't have school fees. They have not even bothered. That's what I'm saying. Most parents, some of them are irresponsible. There are so many TVETs. These TVET
training institutions.
Yes, there are so many in the villages. At least that is one thing that government has been investing in. Some of them don't have anyone. They cannot attract children from those villages. That the 15-year-old who are not going to Form 1 to go there and train to do something. And you see, in the process of being trained at the TVET, they are growing. By the time they are leaving that place, they are almost now the age of employment without struggles.
There is actually something that can be
and those things are also not extremely expensive. We must also ask our parents to be responsible.
Right.
Yes.
Milka, Wahu, thank you for being here. I don't think we can exhaust this in an hour. And of course, opening the opportunity to have more conversations around this in the future. Thank you very much for being here today. Milka Wahu is the Executive Director at Amka Justice and a lecturer at the Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.